Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hello, morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So
Good
it's
morning.
11:30 here in Trinidad and Tobago. Time for us to get started with our session this morning. My apologies. I usually come on a few minutes before to make sure to welcome everyone. But today, as you would imagine, has been a pretty hectic morning as we get a number of persons reaching out to us, more so for last minute registrations as well, but also because, at CCGI here, we are always extremely busy with the stuff that we do. So my apologies. We are now heading to being 1 minute late, which is not something that we do. Therefore, we will just get started. I'll take a second to just check in with Amelia. Did we complete all of the technical check-ins?
We just waiting for Miss Yvette to join us. She hasn't joined us as yet.
I am online. I've been online 20 minutes before the session started.
Yvette Hall. Sorry about that. Not Yvette.
No, but Amber, Yvette is panelist for tomorrow. Today's panelists are Afra, Fazir, Keith, and Kelvin.
Sorry about that. I meant Afra. Sorry about that.
Okay.
He just joined us.
All right. Thank you. So let's just make sure that we get that check in with him, and then I will begin our opening remarks to kickstart today's session. Hey, Afra. Thank you. Can we just do a quick audio check with you as well? Because we are going straight into the opening now. Your mic is unmuted, so we just need to hear you say something so we know that all is coming through well. Afra, you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Nice. So, and we heard that one word just now, but it's enough that we could get started this morning.
Okay.
So let me just get started by saying good morning, everyone. I am Kamala Ramkissoon de Silva, Chief Executive Officer of the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to today's session, part 2 of our procurement series for this year. This series on procurement started a few years ago, as we, among many other stakeholders in Trinidad and Tobago, lent our voice to call on government to proclaim the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Properties Act, which had been drafted and passed in both houses of Parliament for several years before. We were very pleased when it was proclaimed in April of last year. And from all the media reports, we would like to think that the law is making a difference. Today's session, however, is going to look directly at the implications of the law. And we have a panel of experts who will be sharing their insights into what is working and what we still need to do to improve. We are live streaming part of our session this morning on our YouTube channel, which is also being shared on LinkedIn. So hello to everyone who has joined us online, and welcome to all of you who are here today in this room. To all of you, I would like to share that the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute is a nonprofit membership organization, and we welcome everyone who wishes to join in our purpose of improving corporate governance practices in the region. We are pleased to share that our membership reflects persons from Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Barbados, Belize, St. Lucia, Guyana, the British Virgin Islands, St. Martin, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We host a range of workshops and panel discussions on evolving issues in governance, and as well our signature event, Governance Week, and a two-day global conference. All of these are held online to easily facilitate persons throughout the Caribbean region. We host one major end-of-year event, which is a fun networking activity and is held face-to-face. This event will be held in Guyana this year from November 19th to 23rd. There will be 2 physical workshops because, as you can see, we have made it a week of activities, not just our end-of-year networking. The first workshop is on insurance and risk and will be held on Tuesday, November 19th. The second workshop runs over 2 days, Wednesday, November 20th and Thursday, 21st, on governance and compliance. Both workshops will be facilitated by Claire Gomez-Miller, and the second workshop will include a simulation from Harvard Business Publishing, which I will help facilitate. On Friday, we host a panel discussion on effective board papers, and this session is geared specifically for our Corporate Secretaries Network. After which we will be joining in some unique Guyana games to enjoy around a bonfire. And as much as the panel discussion is geared to CorpSecs, the fact that we are looking at effective board papers means that everyone who is involved in the boardroom should be present to know what they should expect when they get their board pack. So the week in Guyana culminates with a governance dinner and end-of-year networking event on Saturday, November 23rd, when the opening keynote will be our beloved Professor Bob Garrett, CCGI's Global Ambassador. All of these events will be held at Splashman's Resort, which is a beautiful and unique facility built around a man-made lake in Georgetown. Registration is already open. We are offering special packages for room and meals for the weekend, but I'm sure you will understand that we are giving first preference to our members and to those persons who would have attended our end-of-year events in the past. And I'm sure you'd also appreciate space at Splashman's is extremely limited. So we're encouraging those of you who may be interested to reach out to us. Now, with respect to our online training sessions, we run these types of panel discussions on an ongoing basis. Tomorrow, for instance, we have another panel discussion. This will be on governance of credit union, which is another series we run. Tomorrow, we will be examining the area of due diligence and how directors are selected for the Board of Credit Unions, okay? And then on Wednesday, we have a workshop for corporate secretaries, which will be facilitated by Faye Lopez Colimo on writing board minutes and other corporate documents. I'm also thrilled to share that our 5th annual global conference will be held on November 5th and 6th and will feature the former president of Armenia as our opening keynote. Mr. Amen Sarkisian was the 4th president of this former Russian state, who traveled the world as a diplomat. He wrote an extremely inspirational book entitled The Small States Club, in which he gives a first-hand perspective on how some small countries were able to navigate the turbulence in the world to become developed countries. We in the Caribbean can learn a lot from these experiences as we too seek to improve quality of life for everyone in our region. Registration will be open soon for the global conference, but I invite you to visit our website to look at details of all of our events, which are already open for registration. So if you are not yet a member, do consider joining us and actively contribute to the conversation on how we can improve leadership and governance to achieve sustainable outcomes. Persons may join us as individual members, or your companies may choose to pay for bundle membership, which can cover from 6 to 12 members. As a member, you get discounted rates to attend our many events and activities planned for the year. Now, just before we start today's panel discussions, I'd like to make our usual housekeeping announcements. I know that we have quite a few persons who are joining us for the first time for a session. So I'd like to ask you, please ensure that your name is correctly captured on your screens. We are in a virtual room together, which allows each of us to access and engage freely with other participants. So we would like to ensure that everyone is easily identifiable. We also ask, please, that you keep your microphones on mute throughout the session. This is so as to minimize any disruptive noises from your background. So when we move to that Q&A segment, if you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand using the virtual icon at the bottom of the screen, or you may put your comments and questions at any time in the chat feature, and these would be brought to the attention of the panelists. Those of you who need to earn CPDs or PDUs as part of your ongoing certification may use these sessions to claim your points. However, to do so, you need to email us requesting the certificate. We will first verify your attendance before issuing the certificate with CPD hours. Note that this is an automatic process for persons who participate in our workshops, but these, our public discussions, they're not automatically issued. It's only for those persons who need to gather their CPD hours. Finally, we will put a survey link towards the end of today's session, and we would appreciate it if you take 2 minutes to give us your feedback, please. This is extremely important for how we plan and execute on our sessions to ensure that we are meeting your expectations and your needs. And so now it is my pleasure to introduce our panel for today. I will begin with the president of the Joint Consultative Council. In fact, I will introduce all of the panelists one after the other. Then I will ask them in turn to speak individually to share their perspectives for 8 to 10 minutes before engaging a more general conversation. Okay, so we begin with Mr. Fazir Khan, who, as I said, is the current president of the Joint Consultative Council, the JCC, an appointment he took up in 2019. So, Fazir, if you can put on your video, please, we would like to bring up all of our panelists on screen as we introduce them. Thank you. So Fazir is the managing director as well of Alpha Engineering and Design Limited, with over 30 years experience as a practicing professional civil engineer and project manager working here in Trinidad and Tobago and within the Caribbean. He graduated from the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago with a BSc Honors in Civil Engineering. He also has a diploma in management from Henley University in the UK and certificates in project management from the Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business. He's a certified modeler of the detention pond systems, urban stormwater management, and hydrological modeling for state sustainable solutions on large sites. Fazir also has a certificate in integrated coastal zone management and a certificate in circular economy from Cambridge University. Apart from the Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago, where he is a past president, he is also a registered member of the Board of Engineering of Trinidad and Tobago and the British Hydrological Society in the UK. He also currently serves as the Industry Liaison Board of the University of the West Indies since 2017, reporting to the Joint Board of Moderators in the UK. Our second panelist I would like to introduce now is Mr. Kelvin Ramkissoon. And Kelvin is a practicing attorney at law and public procurement specialist who has practiced extensively in the civil law arena, primarily in public and commercial law. Kelvin holds a Master of Law qualification in Public Procurement Law and Policy from the University of Nottingham and is a former course director of the Certificate in Public Procurement at the Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business here in Trinidad and Tobago. He has provided extensive training and consultancy services in public procurement to state enterprises and the private sector. And as we move to our third panelist, I would like to believe that everyone here knows Mr. Afra Raymond. Afra is a professional fellow of RICS and the managing director of Raymond and Pierre Limited. He contributes to the press and broadcast media in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. His special areas of interest include real estate, property development, land use planning, property taxation, property financing, and the 2009 bailout of the CL Financial Group. His work is at afraraymond.net. Also, Afra is past president of the Institute of Surveyors of Trinidad and Tobago and a past president of the Joint Consultative Council for the construction industry, having served between 2010 and 2015, which most of you would recognize were really crucial years for the development of this act. And our final panelists is our representative from the National Gas Company, Keith London. Keith is a multidisciplined, customer-oriented, strategic thinking procurement professional with over 30 years experience in building relationships, cultivating partnerships, and pursuing profit channels. He is committed to providing leadership to enterprises towards achieving significant, sustainable improvement in business performance through efficient and effective supply chain management systems, which is one of the primary enabler for increasing profitability. As a supply chain management consultant, he has provided hands-on support and training to entities in readiness for compliance to the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act 2015, including but not limited to revision of procurement policies and procedures towards alignment with OPR guidelines and associated regulations, as well as rollout of revised policies and training and certification of staff evidencing required procurement competencies. As I said, he is currently engaged at NGC, the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, in the capacity of manager, contracts and procurement, where he provides leading support for alignment and compliance with the Public Property Act. His background is in engineering, business process improvement, and ERP implementations. So as you can see, we have a really nice panel here this morning to discuss the implications of the procurement law here in Trinidad and Tobago. And Mr. Khan, we wanted to be able to start the discussion this morning with you. So if you were able to put back on your video now, I would like to invite you to share with us for 8 to 10 minutes your perspectives on the implications of the procurement law here in Trinidad and Tobago. Over to you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm glad to be part of this panel discussion. I think it is very, very important to continue our discourse in the public space with respect to this new legislation, which has the potential to reform the way that public money is spent in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, with the advent of the new law in actual operationalization in April 2023, several things happened immediately, which was the repeal of the Central Tender Court Act. Most of you would be aware of that. This legislation replaced the Central Tender Court Act. And however, the OPR, the Office of the Procurement Regulator, was established a couple of years before that, and they would have done some really important work in the time that they have been established in order to produce all the documents and procedures, etc., and also to assist in reviewing and writing the regulations to go with the Parent Act. Post operationalization in April, there was an immediate requirement for an annual report, which, in our interpretation in the law, should have been due at the end of the year. The regulator saw it fit to make it an annual in terms of 12 months from April. And that was only made in Parliament last week. So we're talking about October 2024. You would have seen a lot of responses in the press already, which is good, concerning that report and what it says. So what I like to say is that it is for the first time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, we have a report on comprehensive report on procurement by all entities in Trinidad that utilize public funds. And the report itself would have captured as much data as it could. You will notice as well, even in the executive summary, there is I would say, complaint throughout the report that it was quite challenging for the regulator to get information, get data from the various agencies. And in essence, what the report actually showed that there was a lot of non-compliance with respect to the utilizing or carrying out procurement under the Act. And the report is very good in that it shows graphically these deficiencies, and one can get a good sense of it if one reads the executive summary. And of course, it's, I think, about 400 pages if you have the time to read the rest. But the public for the first time has the data from an independent body to which they can have a look and make an opinion or make a query concerning procurement in this country. The reason we have procurement reform is because what was applicable before in terms of making it mandatory and in law for procuring entities to publish information and produce data that would be available to the public. That was not part of the Central Tender Board Act. So I think it is a major step forward. There is a big learning curve, and one only needs to measure where we are on the curves with the regulators report. And so there's a lot of work to be done. Now, I just want to say one more thing before I end my first speech here. It's that the OPR, even though it's well staffed with highly qualified people, there is no way that they have the capacity to look at all the nooks and crannies and all the details. And it therefore falls to the public generally and to bodies like this convened here today to assist the OPR by reviewing the data where we can and making sensible comments and queries. And there is a facility within the Act for these to be official, either in terms of complaints, and there were something like 26 complaints to date, which all have been dealt with by the OPR or in some stage of being dealt with very transparently. And one can also just raise an issue in terms of if there is a evidence that any entity, any procuring entity is not following the law, and the OPR will then pick that up and try to resolve the matter. So we are at very, very early stages. There are going to be significant growing pains. There's much to be done on the side of the procuring entities. And at the outset, I would like to say that the excuse of not having capacity is not one that we at the GTC accept so easily, because this thing has been in the making for quite a while, and we have to ask the question as to who was responsible for outfitting and making these bodies have the relevant capacity. Nobody likes change. Change management is something that is that we all understand is a difficult process. But I am particularly surprised by the lack of compliance with the Act as reflected in the independent audit, in the independent annual report from the OPR. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fazir, and we appreciate your alluding to that report. And so, in fact, we do have a clip which we'd like to share at this minute. And as we pull that up, I also want to thank our journalists who are present. Today, we have Melissa Maynard from the Express and Rahal Lal from the Guardian newspapers. Thank you, guys. We appreciate the work that the media is also doing in respect of building awareness for the public. Amelia, do we have the clip ready now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So now we are going to share this 3-minute clip, which is an interview with Beverly Khan, the regulator at OPR, where she shares some of the information that Fazir just spoke to. So let's go to that clip.
For just over 1 year, Beverly Khan has been leading the Office of Procurement Regulation. Last April, the full proclamation of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act meant that after years, there now exists a uniform process to acquire and dispose of all public assets across all government ministries and state agencies.
The important thing here is using public money, using the money that you and I pay in taxes, right, to the Treasury. So how efficient we spend that money is going to determine how much things we are able to do as a country.
In an exclusive interview with CNC3 News on Thursday, Khan identified the challenges and demands associated with the transformative change. Among the independent body's major undertaking was the compilation of a report on the performance of the body under the Act. It was laid in Parliament on Monday. Among the findings was the failure by public bodies to subscribe to the principles of good governance as exposed by the OPR's whistleblowing platform.
We have received just over 60. People use it for all sorts of things, not only procurement, right? Okay. So there are matters that have been raised.
However, following assessments of the complaints linked to bribery, bid rigging and corruption, 53 cases were closed, while 7 remain active. The OPR is awaiting further information to determine how to proceed with 8 others.
We have taken the route of going to investigations, but very soon we will be embarking on the audit program as well. So yes, some that have seen shocking, yeah, but perhaps not surprising.
Khan also flagged government ministries, 2 of which failed to provide a history of their contract reporting over the last year. Among them, the Ministry of National Security.
What makes it concerning?
The issue of transparency and accountability. Those are objects of the Act, right? The Act requires that, we present the data so that the public can scrutinize how public monies have been spent.
Khan said she was optimistic of a shift from an over-reliance on non-competitive procurement practices, or what's also known as sole source procurement, whereby only one supplier provides a commodity or service. Khan explains that transitioning to the new regime has seen an unsatisfactory level of compliance by public bodies to the legislation. She is, however, hopeful that there will be positive shifts in the future. Jesse Ramdale, CNC3 News.
Thank you so much, Amelia. And I thought that this news clip would have really also given us some greater context for understanding the serious implications that we are dealing with. So Beverly Khan spoke of feeling shocked, but not surprised at some of the findings. And there are many reasons for this. So I'm going to let the panelists be the ones to share their perspective and thoughts on this. So Kelvin, if you are available now, I know that you are changing devices now. So if you are available, we'd like to invite you to speak next. And the reason I'm asking Kelvin is not only because he is a lawyer, one of the few legal minds trained in this area, but I do want to share on his behalf. He has really been very gracious in sharing some of his time with us this morning. He does have a hard stop in a half-hour time when he needs to exit for I think it may have been a court matter. But at any rate, Kelvin, we are very happy to have you join us here this morning, and I want to invite you now to share your thoughts for the next 10 minutes or so. On the
I'm having some difficulty hearing because there's rain pounding on the roof, so I just want to make sure everyone can hear me.
Yes, we are hearing you clearly.
Thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be among this very distinguished panel this morning and to have been invited by your institute to share my thoughts. And one of the things we have to realize is that in reading the report done by the procurement regulator a few days ago, I think it was on September 9th, one report called it as dispiriting. And I want to echo those who spoke, those sentiments. I see Mr. Khan dealt with it. But my thoughts are that since the proclamation of the Act, I don't think we can see any meaningful or effective changes in the public procurement regimen. Those are my respectful views at this stage. And I preface it basically on the advices that I have been given and on the questions that have been posed to me in my capacity as a specialist in the field, and my capacity as being some lecturing at Lockjaw in the certificate in public procurement. But perhaps the only two discernible changes that I can see so far is first of all one of procedure, the involvement of the PDAC and so on, and how procurement is undertaken. And secondly, in the case of statutory boards and state enterprises, the doing away or abolition of the board tenders committee. And the rationale is that really and truly boards are seen as an extension of government because they are really politically appointed by the politicians of the day. So those are the two major changes that I can see so far. And there's a third element now, which is the fact of the creation of a regulator in the form of the OPR. And of course, this regulator has sweeping powers conferred by legislation. The law now requires you to follow and enjoin a statutory and regulatory process in the way things are done. So for the first time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, barring the Central Tenders Board Act, is that the way procurement is done in the state enterprises and the statutory boards and so on is that we now have statutory underpinning, regulatory underpinning by the creation of legislation. But I think overall it is still too early, Madam Moderator, to say whether it is working or not. More data, more analysis are needed. And I think there has to be a synergy between the procurement bodies and the public bodies and the regulator and the state. And the procurement bodies must recognize and appreciate the compulsion to comply with the Act and the reporting obligations thereunder. That is why I said the report of the regulator was so disheartening in many respects. But I think overall there has been a tremendous amount of misunderstanding, fear, and simply not knowing the mechanics of the public procurement process. And a great degree of uncertainty exists. Now, of course, there are exceptions, but we have to appreciate that the transit to the new system has been sharp, it has been abrupt, without adequate time, the effort being made to train and develop capacity in the public bodies. Now, of course, public bodies are constrained by budgetary limitations, human resources, challenges, and so on. But what I find remarkable is that in many instances, the public bodies themselves are not really staffed by persons holding any significant or any qualification at all in public procurement. There are great people with exceptions like Keith London, well qualified in the field and so on. There are exceptions with people who have SIPs, the SIPs qualifications, and people who did the certificate in public procurement at Lockchart. So the result is that there's a certain degree of feeling of doubt or uncertainty in what you're doing. An unhappy feeling, a perception to some extent that you have the fear of the big stick of a challenge under sections 49 to 51 of the Act being brought against you at any time. And of course, the big stick of hefty fines and jail terms under the legislation. And regrettably, that scenario produces possibly two outcomes, Madam Moderator. I think the first one is that you continue to do things as they are, same old way, or you do what you think is right, and you could be right or wrong about it. But I start off, first of all, as Mr. Khan said, by complimenting the OPR for its genuine and sincere efforts in training public bodies and in doing the work that they have done. But I'm saying that respectfully, you need to develop capacity. And that transit period when the Act was passed before its final proclamation, I think regrettably, public bodies, state enterprises, ministries, and so on, did not use that time to develop capacity, train their personnel to handle the incoming manner in which the new regime operated. But that window of opportunity has gone. So based on the experiences that I have had, Madam Moderator, I see that very often provisions of the Act are being interpreted with that fear, that degree of uncertainty. And it largely stems, of course, from the lack of training and lack of exposure to what the new regimen requires. Now, for the first time as well, you have the rights of contractors and tenderers being underpinned by legislation, giving them rights to bring challenge proceedings. Of course, a few challenge proceedings have been brought so far, and I've looked at the website of the OPR and saw that the majority, I think, if not all that I have read, have been dismissed, in most instances for procedural errors such as failing to file on time, and so on. So what I want to say is that the culture of public procurement being done in a tick-in-the-box exercise, you would have heard me use, those of you who know me, this expression time and again. VAT certificate, tick. BIR certificate, tick. NIS certificate, tick. That doesn't result in a good procurement, most instances. So what it does is that it disregards the provisions of the act that could probably give you some degree of discretion. And I think for you to understand the way in which it is done, you need to understand the legislation, have sufficient capacity and training. Of course, that is not to say it is not happening. I think it is happening in some instances. And there are instances where I have seen public bodies have fallen short. So whether the act is working or not, at this stage, I think it is simply too early. And I think many in the public domain have seen the legislation as a panacea for corruption and that it will stem corruption and so on. And I want to say outright that from the literature and research and training I have done outside of Trinidad and Tobago and in my own thesis, there is no positive correlation between procurement legislation anywhere in the world or anti-corruption legislation and less corruption. I could give you the data, but I could give you the examples of the countries. But let me just say, for instance, in the Nordic countries and in big places like the Netherlands, New Zealand, and so on, where there's an almost absence of corruption legislation and procurement legislation, they continue to score very well in the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, in contrast to countries like Nigeria, India, Bangladesh, and other countries which have a suite of legislation and they do not score well at all. So the legislation is not a panacea for corruption. And the report of the regulator gave 60 instances of reported corruption. You can read the report, all 472 pages of it. But I want to say, first of all, what would help, Madam Moderator, is I think with the greatest of respect to the OPR, and in spite of all their sincere and genuine efforts, I think what is often published on their website is too long, it is too complex, the language could be more user-friendly. And for instance, one example which I draw, and in which the procurement regulator has self-commented, in terms of a percentile amount of persons or public bodies that filed the annual procurement plan. I think it was somewhere 26%. But if you look at the information on the website of the OPR, with the greatest of respect, it is very confusing, it is very complex, and I think that, for instance, needs to be simplified, as are some of the handbooks and guides and so on. That is not to say in any way I'm condemning or denigrating the documents. They're all very good products, which at the end of the day. But I think, should they be simplified, I think it would help. It would help the public bodies and those engaged in the public procurement process. Now, I think it is still early days. One has to appreciate the deficiencies in information. It is only one report that has come out so far. I am optimistic that as the years and months progress, that we could probably see some improvement in the way, in terms of compliance with the legislation and things being done in a different way. But I want to end with the remarks of the regulator herself, when I think she said, or she identified, that just about $5 billion of procurement in the preceding year was done on methods, procurement methods other than open tendering or open bidding, and was done on either sole tendering, emergency procurement, or what we call restricted tendering. Now, what is the effect of that? The effect of that is that it suggests to me that if you marry that against the Section 5 objectives of the Act for Transparency, Accountability, and so on, you would see when we have restricted tendering or we have emergency and sole source tendering, the literature is saying you do not always achieve value for money, because you go into an emergency situation where there may be the proclivity or tendency of the contractor to jack up his price because it's an emergency. And the literature suggests, in one case study I've read, for instance, in Yugoslavia, where there was a 37% saving where the public hospital used for a drug pharmaceutical procurement used open bidding, open tendering instead of restricted or sole select. So there's a lot of value. And how does that come? It comes from proper procurement planning, absolute proper procurement planning. Say what you anticipate. We all know, for instance, the examples as I have drawn, there's a rainy season and a dry season. Trees will fall in Toko and on Lady Young, and people will have to be engaged, contractors, to clean it up, to replant, to cut the hills in Maracas, and so on. So it is not situations like this that will often attract us an emergency sole select procurement. If you plan ahead, you must realize these things. And I advocate this morning proper procurement planning. I advocate proper compliance with the legislation. And most of all, I advocate, Madam Moderator, capacity development and training. It is extremely important that we train people, let them have exposure to legislation, how it is done, how it is to be interpreted before we put them in this thing. And those are my respectful views this morning, Moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelvin Ramkissoon, attorney at law. Kelvin, I know you need to leave us in a few minutes. I hope you will be able to stay at least to hear the contribution from Afra. But I just wanted to share that in the chat, we have had two persons who have been agreeing with your contribution. We've had Reshma Maraj Singh, who agreed with the point you made about the complexity of the information on the OPR's website. So hopefully due notice taken of that. And we also have Yvette Hoyt, who agreed with your last point, where she says that the planning is the biggest element that is lacking in public bodies. Now, this is something that I am also sure that our next panelist is going to be pretty much in agreement with. As a matter of fact, Afra has been on this platform before, and one of the biggest points he has made, which I feel we have not addressed in this country, is even before we move to procurement, is that area of needs analysis as well. And all that is part of this notion of planning in order that we get our best results at the end of the day. Afra, I'd like to invite you to unmute so that you could now share your thoughts and perspectives on the implications of this law.
Right, right.